Welcome to the Hot Dish. I'm Heidi Heitkamp.
And I'm Joel Heitkamp. We're recording this on January 6, 2026. It's the 5-year anniversary of that horrific assault on the Capitol by the Donald Trump supporters. We've got former Senator Joe Donnelly with us. He served the great state of Indiana. Believe me, I've got to talk to him about football in a little bit, Heidi as well. They both served in the United States Senate. We're going to talk about their experience as well as the state of the nation today under the second Trump administration. So hang on, folks. This is going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride, but welcome back to the Hot Dish. Senator Donnelly, who's going to win the national championship when it comes to football? Let's get it over with right now.
Oh, the Indiana Hoosiers. Absolutely. No question.
Heidi, do you agree with that?
Actually, that's who I'm cheering for. So how excited are people in Indiana?
Joe? Everybody is over the moon because you have to realize the Hoosiers were one of the most losing teams over the years. And so Coach Cignetti came and everything completely flipped upside down. And now they're playing, if you watch the Alabama game, it was breathtaking. It was like men against boys. And so everybody is really, really excited, fired up. No IU sweatshirts in any stores right now. It's pretty cool.
Well, your coach, you watched him. There was no celebrating for him until he got to go, until the awards ceremony. But man, he's got an intensity. And I think the one
How'd you
thing
like for him to be your dad? Huh?
And come home with a note from the principal.
Right, Dad, I got all A's. And then you get that look.
Well,
why didn't you take
I think
more
he
courses?
was a lot like our mom, Heidi. Let's just be honest.
Yeah. Well, hey, he's not going to celebrate until the job is done. No. That was obvious.
He's the real deal. Yep, you bet.
And anyone who thinks that it doesn't matter, I think there's just people who think it's all about a quarterback or a young talent. At that level, it's about coaching. And that's what this team proves, is that when you have a great coach who demands excellence, you get excellence.
Everybody knows their job. Yep. Yeah. There are a lot of them are Saban disciples too. Not to interrupt, I apologize, Joel, but a lot of them are Nick Saban disciples, and Nick was always about the process. Says if we do our job properly, then we'll be fine. We can't control what the other team does in terms of their game planning or this or that, but we have a job. We do our job properly. We'll be okay.
Well, let me add this as somebody who is cheering for Indiana as well, and is a fellow Catholic. How's Notre Dame doing in this whole thing?
Well, Notre Dame is actually may well be the best team in the country, but will not get that chance to prove it since there were nefarious efforts in the playoff seedings, and so a team that was richly deserving of being in there, and actually was probably one of the top 4 or 5. Never got the shot. And who I felt bad for, as always, is the kids, the young men, who a guy like Jeremiah Love, who came very close to winning the Heisman Trophy, is a wonderful young guy. And so you want to see him get the chance to play.
Well, let me just say this, Joe. Senator, I got to tell you, 9457, that's the street address where you can send that $20 to me for giving you a chance to say all that and asking.
Well, that's okay, but it was only worth $10.
Because everybody who knows football knew this, Joel. Everybody who knows football knew this.
What the heck? I'm from the Midwest, and we don't throw $20 bills around.
That's half a case of Busch Light instead of a full case. I'm okay with that.
Busch lattes.
Yeah, you guys, this conversation, and of course, we're on the anniversary, 5 years of January 6th. The people that were in that Capitol were friends of yours. They were acquaintances of yours. They're people whose cell numbers you had, and I have no doubt you were texting and trying to find out what was going on. I'm going to go with you first, Senator Donnelly. When you saw all of that, what did you think?
I honestly wished I was there because I wanted to help out. I wanted to help stop these felons who attacked our Capitol, these people who attacked our government. I just wished I was there and, there to help the police or there to help my fellow senators. It it was heartbreaking, because here's what I also thought, Joel. Here these people attack the Capitol, charge the building, come in, and they're in our building, and I say our building, the American People's Building, down in the basement is a cafeteria where there are people working to be able to put their kids through school, who are trying their hardest to put together a nice meal for visitors, for whoever, and they're running away for their lives. I and Heidi knows this too. I had this thought in the cloakroom of the Senate. We had a couple of bats in there, baseball bats. They were from the congressional baseball game, or from a famous St. Louis Cardinal came through or something and left an autographed bat. And I was thinking, boy, I hope somebody's got their hands on those, just so they can protect themselves from these folks who meant to kill the vice president of the United States, who meant to kill others there. It was. I never believed I'd see anything like that.
Heidi,
Joel.
Heidi, I got to ask you this question, because I know you and Joe well enough that I know you must have built relationships with the Capitol Police. These had to have been friends of yours. What was your reaction to what was happening to them, Heidi?
Well, I was watching, like Joe, thinking about not only the colleagues, but all the staff people and what was going on. And not only were the Capitol Police great friends, so were the people at the desk, the parliamentarian, who, interestingly enough, if you told any member of Congress, go to Senate, go to the parliamentarian's office, they wouldn't know their way down. I mean, I would, because I've been there. Guess what? Guess where these infiltrators went? They went to the parliamentarian's office because they were looking for the ballots. I mean, there is so much more to be told in this story. And, there is a story, which I believe, which is the people that Joe was just talking about, the staff who, the janitors, all of the people who work there, who come anytime the Senate's in session. The men herded the women staff people into a corner. Most of them are immigrants, first generation Americans. They work hard, and they literally stood there with box cutters ready to defend themselves. That's how terrifying it was. And I remember watching, I was doing television for ABC. And so, it was going to be just a quick hit, 15 minutes. This is going to be easy. And then all hell broke loose. And I was on the air with Chris Christie, and he was trying to get a hold of the president to say, stop it. Everybody, what's so interesting to me is in that moment, everybody was united, Democrat, Republican, Independent, that this was a horrific event. This was a terrible event, should never have happened. Everybody for a good 24 hours decried and screamed to the top of their lungs about how horrible this was. And Donald Trump basically, the cult kicked in, and everything changed. And now we've pardoned these people, many of whom, incidentally, have been arrested, not for small crimes. A lot of those have been arrested for domestic violence. Those people he pardoned, domestic violence, sexual assault. I mean, these are not good people who stormed the Capitol that he, in fact, pardoned. And he basically martyred the one person who tried to climb through the window and lead a charge into the House of Representatives. I mean, people are going to look back on this, and they're going to see the videotape. They're going to see the history in real time of what happened, and they're going to wonder how the hell the Republican Party got so brainwashed into thinking that this was okay. And I believe this. I believe that Mitch McConnell still believes it was a horrific, horrible thing. And I'll bet you he goes to his grave regretting not moving to impeach Donald Trump and preventing him from becoming president again.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to mention is I believe to this day that if President Trump had immediately gotten on television, told them to stop, that this was un-American, that you're attacking our Capitol, go home. We believe in our police officers. He always talks about being the law enforcement president. Well, if you're the law enforcement president, you stand up for our officers. And that didn't happen.
Well, and I
hours
think
and hours later, in a half-hearted effort.
the other thing that as history will develop, the rollout of the Jack Smith deposition on why he thought that it was indictable, that is now in the public history. The stupidest thing that the Oversight Committee, the Republicans on the Oversight Committee did was basically subpoena and take a deposition of Smith, because he's a seasoned prosecutor. He knew what he was doing, and he basically laid out the case against Donald Trump. And that's what's going to be on the history, in the history of what happened that day.
So, Senator Donnelly, think Americans are ever really going to know the whole story, though? I mean, the election stopped the process that Jack Smith was bringing. In fact, it took it just the other way, to where Smith himself was, we're looking at charges. I mean, do you think America is ever going to hear his full body of work?
I think the people of America know what happened. They know their capital was attacked. They saw it with their eyes. Joel, there's a certain percentage that they saw it with their eyes, and they're still not going to admit what they saw. But most Americans know what happened, think it was a shameful, shameful, shameful event, an attack to overthrow our government, and they know that. All this other stuff is trying to, what do they say? How do they put it? Put lipstick on a pig is what it is. Because, look, these policemen and women, heroic. And there's a plaque that should be hanging in the Capitol right now that they still haven't put up, talking about their heroism. And, the speaker and others have found like a million excuses to not put it up. Well, the number one excuse is you don't have the courage to tell the truth.
Well, and Joel, the reality is that you can't whitewash this. I mean, in all of the prosecutions of these criminals who invaded, there are victim witness statements. I think you know that Eugene Goodman, who famously led them away from the Senate chamber, is one of my best friends in the Capitol. And, I asked him how he was doing. He said he's done so many victim witness statements, where he's basically telling it from his perspective. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the release of the documentation that Smith basically the case that he was creating before Donald Trump got reelected. That's all going to come out, and it's going to be analyzed, and it's going to be reviewed. But in the moment, the big failure is the failure of the Congress to hold this president responsible for what happened. And as a result, now we're living in the world that we're living in right now because they failed to do their job.
So, Senator Donnelly, do you believe people died because of this? Do you believe there are people that this cost them their lives?
Oh yeah, there's Capitol Hill police who, fought to prevent people from coming through, getting sprayed, getting punched, getting hit, who suffered a heart attack the next day. I mean that's why. You have some other Capitol Hill police who took their own lives afterwards because of the horrors that they saw and what they went through. And so, yes, I do. Those are heroes. Those are victims of the battle. And they saved the lives of our senators, of our House members, of the people who worked in that building. They saved their lives. And here today, they won't even, the speaker and his team won't even allow the plaque honoring the police officers' heroism to be put up in the Capitol.
Joel, a lot of those police officers, in fact, the vast majority of Capitol Police actually wore the uniform of this country. And a lot of them are Iraqi, Afghani war vets. Many of them said that they, in wartime, serving in wartime overseas was not as horrific as that day. And let me remind you this. I was obviously the chief law enforcement officer, spent a lot of time with law enforcement in North Dakota. We passed a law in workers' comp basically saying if a law enforcement official basically had a heart attack, that was automatically assumed to be service related because of the stress of that job. And so when people say, oh, that didn't have anything to do with it, you know, even in conservative states like North Dakota, we recognize what that stress does and how it can basically cause injury as a result of that level of service. And so, I mean, this is not to be whitewashed. This is not to be swept under the rug. This is something that we need to teach our children. It was a horrific day, and shame on my colleagues in the Senate who refused to this day to acknowledge, number one, that Joe Biden won the election, and number two, that Donald Trump, you know, incited an insurrection against this country.
But the other part is they know Joe Biden won the election. They're just afraid to say it. And, you know, here you and I served in the Senate. And, you know, we tried to do a good job. All our lives wound up in the United States Senate. We were both so fortunate. And it's like, I'm going to come to the Senate and then give my courage and my voting card to the president? I don't think so. I mean, you know, we never did it. When they tell me President Obama was on the phone, I'd think, what is he mad at me about now? That's the job, though. And
Yeah.
it's unbelievable that the members of the House and the members of the Senate is one of the greatest failures of our system right now, is that the legislature has just rolled over, and in a government that has a judicial, a legislative, and an executive, that we really have one functioning branch, the executive, because the judicial has rolled over, it seems, in many ways, too.
So
Well, think about
on my
this.
radio show, hold on, Heidi. On my radio show, the one thing that always comes at me whenever we have this conversation is that prior to the event itself, Donald Trump offered the National Guard to Nancy Pelosi, and that she rejected it. And the reason that the National Guard wasn't there was Nancy Pelosi's fault. Now, that comes at me. That's the Republican answer to this. I don't care which one of you go to answer that, but how would you answer that on my radio show?
Well, when members of the Trump White House were asked, that was always the line, and then when they were asked under oath whether that was true, they dodged the question. So, you know, how honest are they? I mean, this is not a factual determination. And I think it's going to be interesting to see, again, how history reports this. And I think one of the things, and I'm not justifying if she said, look, I don't think we need it. But one other thing I want to say, Joel, is why don't they ever talk about Mitch McConnell? I mean, if he offered the National Guard, he offered it to both leaders on both the Senate and the House. And they always talk about Nancy Pelosi. If they wanted the National Guard, or if he thought the National Guard needed to be called out, why didn't he ask Mitch McConnell? I mean, so Mitch gets a total pass on this, which I've never understood, because no one ever talks about the fact that, you know, it wouldn't just be Mitch who would make that decision on whether there would be a need for the National Guard. It wouldn't be just Nancy. It would have been Leader McConnell as well. And so, you know, we need to have the facts. And the thing is that the Republicans have avoided a complete analysis of what this looks like. There was a movement right afterwards, Joel, to do a commission like the 9/11 commission to kind of get the facts. And the Republicans said, yeah, that's a good idea. Then they backed off when they realized what had actually happened. And as a result, we ended up with the committee in the House doing the hearings, which people thought were biased. And so, you know, what I would say back to those people is, then why didn't they, if this was Nancy's fault, why were they afraid to basically impanel a commission to do a complete evaluation of what happened that day?
Senator Donnelly, I want you to get a chance to answer that too, because I'm a huge Nancy Pelosi fan. I think it's a bunch of BS that she even had to worry about it.
Sure.
It's supposed to be a peaceful transition of power. They can say anything they want. They were just trying to pin blame. Those people were out to kill her. I mean, they would have killed her if they would have found her. And so, for them to put the blame from the White House onto Nancy Pelosi, I want your thoughts on that.
Well, first thought is, President could have had him there anytime he wanted him there. All he had to do was say, "Hey, bring him out." Then they're there. Number two is, why on earth would Nancy Pelosi not have wanted more protection at the Capitol? I mean, it defies common sense. And third is, they wanted to kill her. They wanted to kill Mike Pence. They wanted to kill basically any senator or House member they could get their hands on. They were ready to go. This was all planned in so many ways for a long time before. They knew exactly which windows to go to. They knew exactly how to get in. And you have the men in blue who are our law enforcement officer friends who were friends more than anything. I can remember a number of times, Joel, where like I'd be in the Hart building, one of the office buildings of the Capitol, and somebody would be around me doing some very strange stuff, coming up or this or that. And you almost had an unspoken language between you and the officers, where you'd kind of give them the look, and they immediately knew. And they were over there to help you and protect you and keep you safe. And in return, we gave them nonstop, constant respect. But what happened that day, the president could have stopped at any time he wanted to. And why he did not do that in the first 5 minutes, come on TV and say, "Go home, go home. I'm your president. You're not helping me. This is not the way to do this." And they basically had to drag him out to say anything about it. And so that's where it lays.
Well, and don't forget the fake electors. I mean, this was a broad conspiracy, including what happened in Wisconsin with people trying to submit alternative ballots in Wisconsin, alternative ballots in Arizona. And those prosecutions, to the extent that their state prosecutions, continue to be kind of part of the evaluation. So, I mean, there's a lot in this conspiracy. And I agree with Joe. This was well planned. I go back to, why would they know why would they trash the parliamentarian's office? I mean, really?
And credit to Elizabeth McDonough and her team, who protected the electoral votes. They were under attack and stayed and put the votes like in the containers and carried them out under duress and protected them, and in effect protected us going through with the election. Yeah, the courage of everyone there. Like you said, the people, the janitor teams, the guys coming into the ladies who were cooks in the back saying, "We got your back. We're going to protect it out front here. You guys stay there. If they get through us, be ready." Imagine having to say, "If they get through us, then be ready to protect yourself." We were never raised this way. Well, this is not who the people of America are. And the better nature of the vast majority, I think, understands this.
And don't forget the racial component. Very many of the Capitol Police are African-American citizens who were called horrific names, who were discredited by the insurrectionists who came in that building. And so
men and women who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, protecting the very families of people who said these things to them.
During this conversation, you guys have said, and Joe, you said this, that people know that as far as information coming out, but I'm going to challenge you just a little bit on that, since some of this has come out and maybe it's just social media. But there's visual evidence of two individuals coming from the White House, making sure they got documentation to staffers where they went through the tunnels of the Capitol to get to the parliamentarian's office, to make sure that they got to the parliamentarian what the White House had in regards to all this. I hadn't seen that before.
I'm not sure what them giving that to I apologize. I don't know. The parliamentarian isn't in charge of security. The parliamentarian.
No,
yeah.
Right.
that isn't my point. My point is,
Okay.
it goes directly to what you two have been saying. This is planned. This was orchestrated. They were doing it first through staff when the information that they wanted in the hands of the parliamentarian didn't get into the hands of the parliamentarian because they didn't let them through. Then it came down to plan B and C and D. And so let me ask the question this way. Do you believe the American people believe that Donald Trump actually ordered and orchestrated this?
I don't know what the percentage is. He has his, we reelected him, right? Even after this. So I think deep in their soul they do. Yeah. But for other reasons, they voted for him again. It's like in a scale of, what's more important to me. What he did there in their minds wasn't as important as what they wanted him to do in another term.
Well, what about, and Heidi, I'm going to kick this one to you. Your thoughts on the Liz Cheneys of the world that served on that January 6th committee. You knew it might have been done through the House, but you knew a lot of those people sitting in those chairs.
Oh, yeah,
and
I served in the House. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, my point is this. I think that you two need to speak to that committee when you watched it and the people that were bold enough to have it cost them their careers when it came to elected office.
You need to remember, Joel, when those committee hearings were broadcast, people watched them and they got more and more educated about what happened that day. And that's why Donald Trump was so furious about these hearings. That's why he's got such a vendetta against Liz and Adam, the two Republicans who served on that committee, proudly served on that committee, wouldn't change their mind. Know that the historical weight is going to be with them ultimately. And so, I think every time there is a review or an analysis of what happened, it reminds people and people go, oh yeah, that wasn't good. That day wasn't good. And I believe that most people know that Joe Biden did not lose that election. I think only the hardcore cult, QAnon conspiracy, slim minority believe that Donald Trump won that election. You can't lose 50 plus pieces of litigation when you're challenging it in the courts in front of conservative judges and be rational about whether Joe Biden won the election or not.
Yeah. Joe, I want to ask you this. The people we've been talking about have been pardoned. When you first heard that they had been pardoned, what did you think?
I thought, of course he pardoned them. I mean, it's there's like a deal where if you are punished for doing the wrong thing, but the wrong thing helps him, he'll then pardon you. And it's understood. And the way he continues to keep people in effect doing whatever he wants is they know there'll never be a consequence. But what I thought personally was these are the people, many of them responsible for the officer who died of a heart attack the next day, who attacked these officers, who punched them. The officers thought they were going to lose their lives. People down in the cook's room thought they were going to lose their lives and never see their children again, who attacked our buildings, who were threatening with zip ties to carry away the They wanted to kill the vice president, and we know that room. Heidi and I both know where that room is located, just off the floor of the Senate, where they were basically barricading in, and finally got him down a side staircase to get out of there. But they were heading for that room. They were trying to get him to hang him. Think of that. People who were going to hang the vice president were pardoned. That pretty much who wanted to hang the vice president were pardoned, and who wanted to kill the speaker were pardoned. That pretty much says everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
That they think that it's appropriate.
the other thing is that when you look back and you kind of find out who these characters are, and you realize very many of them have committed crimes again. These were, I mean, there are some people who got swept in the moment. I don't doubt that. Thought that this was some kind of parade that they should join. I don't know what went through their head, but the bottom line is there were some really, really bad dudes.
This was not
whole
the
thing.
Sioux Falls Rotary Club, man.
No.
So
And so now we're stuck with the consequences of this, because every person who thinks that they can commit a crime that benefits the president expects that they're going to get a pardon. I mean, that's the message the president sent,
That's the
like
message.
Joe said.
yeah. So last one. Let me throw this at both of you. What happens in the future? How do we make sure that there's a peaceful transition of power in the future? Joe, I'm going to go to you first on that.
But we all have to be involved. And people go, oh, that's so, that sounds so sappy and this and that. It's not. This is our country. This is your legacy to your children, your grandchildren. If you don't get involved, then other people will make those decisions for you. And so you have to be involved. You have to try to make sure that this amazing place that our grandfathers, great-grandfathers, all the way back centuries fought to protect. We fought to protect this place the right way. What we've seen recently was some really off-center things, but it's our job. It's our job to protect our country, to continue to speak out, to continue to stand up for the right thing, and that's what we're going to do.
I think the first thing, Joel, is we have to pay attention to who we elect in legislatures and governors. I mean, everybody forgets the Governor Kemp of Georgia did the right thing. Governor Ducey in Arizona. There was a lot of pressure on those guys to change those ballots. And they just said, we're not going to do it because we believe in democracy. These were elections that, you had your chance to challenge. It didn't work. And so this begins in state legislatures and it begins in state houses. Never forget that. The states still run this. There has afterwards, Joe Manchin, along with, I forget, maybe Mitt Romney or somebody put a bill in that basically clarified the role of the vice president in certification of elections. And so there was an effort to legislate. That legislation actually passed. Whether that legislation will clarify what the legality is, I don't think there was any legal uncertainty in any of this, but it just seems like the norms that we expect, the norms that we have relied on over a long period of time are out the window. And if you don't legislate norms, then they get walked over. And so I think, in long term, never forget that this begins in the state houses. It begins at the state level that run these elections. Pay attention, support your election officials, get educated, volunteer to be an election official. I did that movie, Joel, War Game, and we basically tested what would happen if this happened again. And it was interesting because after that, the Vote Vets, Vet Voices, which is the C3 of Vote Vets, went around and was invited to various states to simulate what would happen if the insurrection, because the lesson that the insurrectionists take from this is that don't wait for those ballots to get to Washington. You've got to fight this in the state houses. And so the states need to be prepared for something like this again. And, it's foolish to think it couldn't happen.
Well, let me just say this before we shut this thing down. You guys have been using words like they and colleagues, and, you know, it's the Republicans. I mean, it's the Republicans that allowed this. It's, yes, Mike Pence. Yes, Adam Kinzinger. Yes, Liz Cheney. There were some that Mitt Romney, others that stood up and held their ground. But by and large, this all happened in terms of the aftermath because the Republicans were afraid of Donald Trump and they wanted it to happen. They let it happen. And so the messaging from the Democratic side has always been bad about this. I mean, I as somebody who's on the sidelines during it, I was like, just say their names, say who they are, say their party. And if people think it's partisan, I don't give a damn because it is partisan. The whole thing, Joel, was partisan. And that's my problem with our
it
message.
was. And the greatest fear I have right now is legislators who don't who don't do the job they were elected to do, who, as I said, give their voting card to Donald Trump, the Republicans who do. You have, and it is fear. It is fear I'll lose my job. Well, guess what? Heidi and I lost our jobs because of some of the votes that we took and the votes that we made. But that was what we were hired to do, was to do the right thing. And that it's a check of your courage, but it's also a check of, do you even understand the constitutional oath you took to protect our country? You're there to uphold the Constitution, not to protect Donald Trump.
And one thing we haven't talked about, look at the war powers. Look what's happening right now. And Stephen Miller, what a scary guy that guy is. He goes on and basically threatens Greenland. I mean, what world are we living in? And crickets from people like Thune, crickets from people like Johnson, who should be standing up saying, whoa, wait a minute. That is a NATO country. Article 5 might be invoked. I mean,
think of that.
I mean, think of how crazy this is. And the other thing, and people on the Venezuelan stuff, when Trump says this is our hemisphere, what happens when China says, well, this is my hemisphere and Taiwan belongs to us? We Taiwan. Yeah. I mean, he basically
just gave them a permission slip. That's what we've done.
He has written the game plan by basically saying, look, you stole our oil, you seized these assets, and we're going to take them back. I mean,
he gave Putin and Xi, the Chinese leader, a permission slip, because where is our moral authority now when we say, oh, you can't go into another country, Vladimir Putin? Look at us and go, I mean, tell me about
Ukraine
that.
Used to be part of Ukraine used to be part of the USSR. That's the whole theory of his case.
Okay, and this is
invading
the
Ukraine.
Scary part is this is warming up. They want to get Cuba. That's like on the list for next, maybe.
And they want Greenland.
Then Colombia. And this whole Greenland thing, they ought to be impeached for like a Stephen Miller saying, look, nobody can stop us, so we're going to take it. That's not how things work.
Yeah. And what I would add to all of that is I got a call into my show from a Canadian who was very well spoken. And
Canadians always are, Joel.
Yeah, he was a conservative, and he just said, "What in the hell is going on? Have things just gone batshit crazy?" And he said we used to, when he was saying all of this about the 51st state, and when he was saying all this about, Canada can't run itself, we just laughed. We just thought it was Donald Trump being Donald Trump. He said,
not laughing anymore, are they?
After Venezuela and after what clearly they're going to do when it comes to Greenland. We don't laugh anymore. We don't laugh anymore. And so then I asked him, I said, you're part of NATO. If he does this and the rest of NATO gets in a room and says he can't do this breaks the very oath of NATO. This breaks the very agreement that NATO is. Will Canada be willing to step up, or do you think you should step up and take on the United States physically if it comes to that? And he said, we have no choice. We signed on to an agreement with our NATO nation. We're the reason there isn't a World War III. So we have no choice. We'll have to go to war against the U.S. And basically that's what he said, you guys.
All for one and one for all. Article 5 is if one of us is attacked, we all defend. So in this surreal world, it would be the United States against the other NATO states if he went after Greenland.
And I want to make this point. The only time Article 5 has been invoked is on behalf of the United States in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's the only time it's been invoked when they were coming to our assistance. I mean, let me tell you, I would tell you that this is impossible, but watching these legislators, the Republican silence about what's happening right now, no one should assume that they aren't going to take Greenland. No one should assume that they're not going to go into Cuba. No one should assume any of that.
To what we've seen, nobody should assume that anything is off the table.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm gonna add this. I think
now that we've cheered everybody up, Joel.
I think that.
But you know what is the vast majority of Americans know it and think this is
crazy.
The worst possible thing we could be doing.
I think that the best thing we can do to look at where our country is to have the mothers of the world out there and the fathers of the world not let their kids get bullied, because I think Stephen Miller got bullied and he's so angry at the rest of the world that now he's got power. But really, to talk to our kids, to talk to my grandkids, I've got a granddaughter that's 14 years old, and we talk about this in front of her. I want to make sure she knows about it.
Well, I don't know if any of you ever saw the John Candy movie, Canadian Bacon, where he's living, I think, like in Niagara Falls, right across from the Canadian border there. And their sheriff candidate is losing. So they figure we got to do something to make it seem like we're defending the United States. And so I have this mental image of everybody, a number of North Dakotans in the closest town to the border and some Canadians on the other side looking at each other. What are you doing over there?
Yeah. Well, we're out of time, you guys, but Senator Donnelly, as always, thanks.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
Good luck to Indiana.
Go Hoosiers.
State. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hyde, it's always good to have people like him on the hot dish, isn't it?
Do you want me to sing the Indiana fight song?
Yeah.
I don't know
because my voice is so bad. Indiana, oh, Indiana.
Oh, you can't stop now. Thanks for coming on.
Good luck, Joe.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today on The Hot Dish, brought to you by One Country Project, making sure the voices of the rest of us are heard in Washington.
Learn more at onecountryproject.org. That's onecountryproject.org. You can follow us on Substack, YouTube, Facebook, and Blue Sky.
We'll be back next week with more Hot Dish, comfort food for rural America.
Topic of